You're listening in on an animated discussion about Superman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from the Cinematropolis.com. And today's topic is A Little Piece of Home.
This is the episode that introduces Kryptonite and is also the Kryptonite to me caring, because this episode is boring.
I would say the real Kryptonite in this and Superman the Animated Series is how poorly they introduced his key weakness.
Maybe the real Kryptonite is the friends we made along the way.
Oh, man. Yikes. That's real. Okay, Joshua, here's the thing. Kryptonite is obviously a key part of Superman's mythos, and
it's a big deal, yeah.
Yeah, and it obviously warrants its own introduction. I am all on board with that. But what a seriously lame, half-baked, and half-cocked introduction. I mean, they didn't even, from a storytelling perspective, it wasn't well utilized. From a thematic perspective, it wasn't really well utilized, and even literally in the story beats, the way they use it as the weakness and the way they defeat the Kryptonite is just wow. I'm starting to wonder when this is actually only the fourth episode of Superman, if you count, and like Toyman Fun and Games was solid, but I mean, the batting average is not super high. I'll just say that for 4 episodes in. Of the 4,
yeah.
It's and again, I would even say parts of The Last Son of Krypton is also kind of got some weaknesses. So it makes you wonder, like, the vision they had for this series when they set out must have been incomplete, or I don't know, because this is not a great episode, and it's only the 4th episode.
What's interesting to me is that there is a real comparison to be made between the problems with A Little Piece of Home and the problems with Sins of the Father, even though they appeared actually separated in time, like in real lifetime, by a chunk of months.
Probably it's a year, yeah.
The comparison that I would draw is that both of them want us to get from 0 to new story feature in 22 minutes, and they are only marginally interested in how good the vehicle is that gets us there. And I do think that Sins of the Father is a much stronger vehicle to get us a Robin than this is to get us a Kryptonite, but nevertheless, the problems are very similar.
Yeah, well, it just feels like they're checking the box. It's like, hey, we got to introduce Kryptonite, so we got to come up with a story for that. And it just felt like they didn't really care about how they got there. They're just like, all right, now that we've established Kryptonite, we can finally do more Kryptonite stories. But I'm like, no, just make the first Kryptonite story. In fact, make the first Kryptonite story the best one. I mean, because so many villains are going to use Kryptonite as a part of their MO and a part of like the thing that threatens Superman. Why not use any of those villains? Just go ahead and because this is there's probably, in my opinion, we're sitting on about 6 minutes of actual quality content. Very easy to write another 18 minutes with another villain that works. That way at least you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At least, I don't know.
I mean, I don't want to be too reductive, but there is literally a villain of Superman's called the Kryptonite Man. Even that might have been more interesting, right? It's just, okay, we got lots of things to talk about in this episode that are just okay and ways that we would fix them, but we have one new design, only one that we need to talk about.
This one's an important one in my opinion. I think the design we're going to talk about here is actually, while not the flashiest, important character, I would argue.
Oh, yeah. Dr. Emil Hamilton is super important to the Superman show and becomes a big deal to the wider DCAU as we go. So they, whether they knew it or not, and asterisk, they almost certainly did not know, they were introducing a character that they were going to have to use a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and okay, so Dr. Emil Hamilton, I mean, like, again, he's a scientist. He's got glasses, so you know he's serious.
That's right.
But he's got like such a friendly, welcoming voice and presence that you're like, all right, so he's Superman's they're buds. They're meeting in the minds. He's like, yeah, Superman's a good guy. I'll help him out. Yeah.
He does have a very like Sigmund Freud, like serious glasses goatee look, but that warmth in the voice, I think you have nailed something really important. He is going to become something of a confidant to Superman as Superman learns more about his Kryptonian heritage. Dr. Hamilton's going to be a big part of that. And later we will see that Dr. Hamilton's knowledge about Kryptonians becomes deeply important in a Superman story beat, and then hugely important in a Justice League story beat.
Right.
So yeah, this track is really, it's important that he both be a serious scientist and an extremely warm, sort of fatherly, avuncular guy.
Right. Well, and one thing I want to highlight, the way I always kind of look at Emil Hamilton is, I would say he kind of, in a lot of ways, he represents a lot of things, firstly, but the thing that he represents stands out to me, and something that I think will follow the Superman character throughout the DCAU is we're getting a perspective of how an average Joe, I mean, he's a scientist, but like how a common, not like tied up in all of the mess, average person looks at Superman. He's like,
okay, yeah.
All right, I'm a normal guy. Superman needs some help. I'm going to lend my expertise to help him get where he's going to go. That makes him exceptional in that way, or stand out in that way. But I mean, outside of that, he's not really as tangled up in like the politics of Lex Luthor or any of Lois Lane's schemes, or anything. I mean, he just is there to help. He's a resource,
absolutely,
for Superman, and so and I think that's something that changes throughout the series, and kind of helps us, the audience, get a better understanding of how does the general public look at Superman.
Yeah, because he's very warm and helpful to start, and then it gets a little more contentious as you go. Because again, I don't want to spoil if people are watching Superman the Animated Series along with us, but they get into some real serious, deep stuff that involves how the world sees Superman. And for a big chunk of that, Dr. Hamilton is our viewpoint character. And it starts here. He's probably, I mean, there's some story beats that I really like, despite how overall bored I am by this episode. But the fact that Dr. Hamilton is in this one is probably the highlight of the whole thing. And it's only a highlight because I know more stuff, no?
Yeah, no, again, it's, because you know where it's going. It's like, this is an important character. I like how they established this character. But I would say, though, to your point, if I didn't know where it was going, he'd seem kind of like a throwaway character almost.
Absolutely, yeah.
If this is the first time you're seeing Superman the Animated Series and you watch it, like, all right, this is generic scientist man, not, assuming that he's going to be a different scientist man in the next episode. But no, this is a recurring character.
Yeah.
That will have a larger role to play. But yeah, having that perspective of knowing where it goes does, I think, in a lot of ways, add value to this episode overall. One thing I also liked about it, and it ties in a little bit, is the way they utilize Business Lex in this episode. And listen, I know we all have feelings about Business Lex, and I'm not even saying Business Lex's plan in this episode is garbage. And I honestly, it comes down to the very simple, just the way his mannerisms, the way he sees himself. I love when he's talking to one of his scientists. He's like, "Remember, you work for me. There shouldn't be an opinion in your head that I didn't put there." And I was like, "Holy crap! Capitalism 101. What's going on? Whoa!" How Superman says, "Oh, I don't make deals with criminals," and Lex Luthor just kind of reiterates something he's already said. But I just think the way he asserts it is great. I control everything in this town. Your cooperation is not necessary. My offer was merely a courtesy. I still get goosebumps on my head every time we see Superman with his arms crossed, just hovering outside of Lex Luthor's window.
Yeah, and so does Lex.
I love all that stuff. Now, that said, it is purely like the execution of the characterization. I actually think the plot here is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, my feelings about Business Lex in a wider meta context are now well established. They do really great character stuff with him. I love that him being so condescending to his own scientists is what gets one of them to realize they need to go to Lois.
Yes,
I love that.
100%.
I love the negotiation scene that you were talking about between Lex and Superman. I love that. But they spend so much time at the top of this episode making a huge deal about it being Lex's museum for reasons that are not, I mean, like, on one hand, I want to say this is a children's show, so why am I looking so close at it? But they actually use the word tax shelter.
Yeah, okay. I actually made that note myself, and I just put, by tax shelter, does she mean money laundering, question mark? Like, what is that? Because I don't even think this, again, I am not in finance in any way. Right. I'm not going to claim to have knowledge of how these things work. But I would assume tax shelter doesn't accurately reflect what she's implying. She's implying that he's using the museum to launder money, was what my takeaway was.
Yeah, it's...
Maybe, but that wouldn't be a tax shelter, would it?
No, I mean, in fact, endowments to the arts and to museums and things are ways that people who have way too much money, for my personal preferences, try and like both build a more positive public image and offset some of their tax liability by giving a bunch of it away. Like, I get that Lois is mistrustful, but why do we spend so much time on it? And let me just say, I would hopefully not bring this up except for the fact that they brought up tax shelters on this children's show. But let's lay it on the line. The way that they have this museum set up is 10 million lawsuits waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah. I also couldn't, and I know this is part of the scheme, so it's not nearly as funny as I want it to be, but I did think in the moment, I thought it was hilarious at the exact time Lex was saying this museum is the most impenetrable. It was being heisted on the inside.
That's funny.
It was really funny. I know it's part of his plot, but it's just, I love the irony there.
Yeah, but this idea that you have open air exhibits is a good one, right? Like, I recently visited several branches of the Smithsonian for my first time, and most of it is not open air, obviously, but a few things are. You can touch a moon rock, you can touch a rock from Mars, there's some different stuff you can do. You can even touch a couple of very old coins. Not most of them, but some of them. But they're not open air and will shock you if you try and steal it. Like, they embed the item into the table and give you a tiny place where you can just get 2 fingers through, And if you're supposed to be doing kind of like a children's museum or an interactive exhibit, why does it shock the crap out of everybody? Anyway, I would like to believe that if they had not said the word tax shelter, I wouldn't have thought about the liability of this museum, but they brought it up, so it's not my fault.
This is kind of like, and again, I actually am one of the people who defends the Star Wars prequel. I mean, they're not good, but I will defend them in the way that I enjoy the things that work more than I don't enjoy things that don't work. Among the things that don't work so great is introducing Trade Federation negotiations in a series that George Lucas also says is for children.
Right.
This is kind of like that. We're going to talk about tax shelters in this episode of Superman. It's going to be, kids are going to love it.
Yeah, it's weird. And it kind of tumbles down with weirdness from there. Superman toying with the crooks is super dumb.
Okay, also, speaking of the crooks, so the character we meet in this episode, the thug that Lex hires, hold on, I got his name written here somewhere. Joe the Thug.
The other heist. The second heist.
Yeah. The second heist. Sorry, the second heist. I'm thinking of things that are throwaway in this movie, or this episode. Which, by the way, I like the execution of the second heist.
Yeah, it's fun.
But also, we get introduced to Joe as if he's a guy I just got the vibe, I'm like, we're supposed to know this guy from somewhere, right?
Nope.
No, we have never met Joe before. He does this heist, gets away, and also we never see him ever again. Like, he is I guess I'm saying, why not use a villain? Like, why not use this to establish or either use another villain or establish a new villain that we will have a more in-depth episode with later. I don't know. It was weird. A weird choice.
Yeah. They just wanted an action set piece. And I'm with you, actually. That heist is pretty interesting because the like gadget guns and stuff and how those might slow down Superman a lot better than regular bullets would, like all that. But it's also all a stalling thing. Like, there's some good ideas in there, but it just doesn't come to much, And honestly, almost everything that happens in this episode rebounds and makes Lex look really stupid, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
He talks
across the board.
He talks way too much in front of that. Like, I like the scene where he's condescending to the scientist because of where that leads in the plot. But Lex is too smart to say all of that stuff in front of people that aren't Mercy. It doesn't make sense. And hiring this guy who is too stupid to keep Superman near the thing that's letting him beat up Superman makes Lex look dumb.
Also, hiring someone who would say the words, "Oh man, Superman not looking so good. Should we help him?" He hired the nicest criminals in the entire DCAU for his first heist.
And was there always a giant robot T-Rex that could murder people in the museum, or did he add that later? Either way, I don't like the answer. It's dumb. Like because it's all supposed to happen at the museum. So was the T-Rex new? Did he turn it into a killer robot for the plot, or was it always a killer robot? And if so, why? Why? It's not great. It's not very good. I have one other thing that I really liked. Okay.
I just have to say, I didn't consider this, but yeah, he basically lays his whole master plan out for that scientist. I have finally found the tool that's going to allow me to control and beat Superman. I mean, literally spells it out.
Let me talk about my extortion and or murder scheme right in front of you scientist types. Yeah, I don't... Now, he's fantastic when he's with Superman. You're right. He is fantastic when he's with Superman, trying to buy Superman and Superman being an unbuyable guy. All that stuff is great. Almost everything else in this episode makes Lex look really stupid. And you should never have a plot that makes Lex Luthor look stupid.
No. I guess the only silver lining, if I was going to play devil's advocate a little bit, and I do agree, Lex Luthor should never look stupid. The only thing I can get if I was going to argue that would be is maybe they were trying to showcase the degree of his arrogance in general. Like, he was so confident. The guy works for me, so of course, and he's obviously an idiot because I pay him tons of money, so he's going to be quiet. Maybe. I don't think that's. I don't buy it fully either, but. That's what I got.
Yeah.
They're trying to show that he's so arrogant that he would underestimate that his guy would go to Lois Lane. Maybe.
Sure. Maybe. Yeah. There is a little sinisterness too, because those two crooks from the first heist and that scientist, they are all dead men now. Like they are people murdered by mercy off screen.
Oh yeah.
100%.
Oh, totally. Definitely.
So there is a couple of story beats that I really like. They're nestled in stuff that are garbage, but they are little gems, I think. Okay. And one of them is what I jokingly am referring to as Chekhov's lead cup and Chekhov's basketball.
Did you like the basketball plot, Joshua?
What I liked about it was that they established two disparate elements in the first act and the second act that then came to be important in the third act. That is good storytelling. Like, that is using the mechanisms of storytelling well. I don't know that I think it winds up being super brilliant in execution, like in the moment. That I do like that Lois saves Superman. I like that too. So you know what? Actually, I'm talking myself into it. I love it. He's in a museum. Of course there are lead cups there. And we established that Lois can shoot a bank shot, you know?
Okay, Joshua, I'm just gonna. I listen, and I am all on the whole Lois saving Superman train whenever that feels right and all. I just thought the whole shooting the kryptonite into the light cup like it was a basketball thing. I found it to be. I mean, I know this is a children's cartoon, I know, but it was just so silly. It was so silly, and I was like, what is going on?
It is silly, but it's silly that makes Lois the center of the fight, right? And it didn't come out of nowhere. I would think it was the dumbest thing ever if they hadn't established that that's how she practiced thinking. You know, like if we hadn't seen her doing it, I would be like, where did this come from? But my gosh, we establish the existence of those cups and Lois's skills in two different scenes that then come together in the last scene. I'm a pretty big fan of it. Pretty strong.
All right. I'll give it to you. I am.
But it is silly.
I found it ridiculous, so silly that I just was like, of course. At the end of this, by the time we get to the end of this episode, I was like, well, of course, this is how they solve the problem. It's just, I found it absurd. But hey, I will say, I agree. Purely from a plotting perspective, removing even the specifics of what they're doing, the setup and payoff is there. So I'll give you that. Well, Joshua, now that we've kind of have really just taken this episode to the mat, you know, it's I have to bring back this week's Superman power level check-in, and I gotta say, not a lot of great material to work with here. But I will say, one, the way that he fought Joe the Thug was a question. But the thing I noted here was that he did show signs of sweating when he was throwing the flaming helicopter. Like, he looked like it was work. You know, it wasn't like seamless. So what I'm getting a feel for, the flame still, he is not immune to heat, at least in this particular scenario. However, it doesn't impact his strength. So he can take the heat, will still sweat. The helicopter is slightly more challenging, but not so challenging he can't throw it. I don't know. Kind of a weak example, but there wasn't a lot to work with in this week.
This is a tough one to kind of get a beat on as far as that goes, because the Kryptonite's presence is going to skew him all over the place to super duper weak. You know, I did think that it was a little questionable that he was just able to throw something into orbit. Yeah. That seems a little beyond the power level that we have established for this show so far.
Yeah. Okay. I
don't care. I like him more powerful, to be honest, but at the same time, I'm like, he had trouble with a helicopter. I know this doesn't weigh very much, but it had to hit escape velocity. I don't know.
It's he can throw the flaming helicopter into space, so I like powerful Superman as well. The consistency's not there. You know, I'm gonna start making a note here though, looking out for like what his power levels are with the Kryptonite, because I also feel like that might be different week to week as well.
Yeah, that knob is going to be a variable.
So Superman can throw flaming things. So good on you, Superman. And you're getting more stronger each and every week.
Now, you have made the point that introducing Kryptonite with a couple of interesting villains might have been a way to go. And I wanted to just do a real quick counterpoint before we get out of here with an idea that I had that I thought would have been really, really interesting.
Go for it.
That would not have required a new supervillain. You know, it would in fact be kind of a character drama centered on Superman that we could also have a couple of fights in.
Right.
My favorite Superman story of all time is All-Star Superman, written by Grant Morrison. And Grant Morrison tells a story about how this is the idea, the germ of the idea that would become All-Star, is that at San Diego Comic-Con several years ago, he met a guy in Superman cosplay that was nailing it. Like, he just looked perfect. And when Morrison went to meet him, the guy talked to him in character, and they had at like dawn one day an hour-long conversation about what it's like to be Superman, and this guy just answered very intelligently and thoughtfully and 100% in character the entire time. Okay, and one thing that Morrison noticed about him is his body language. He like just pulled his leg up, just kind of tucked his chin on his knee and had a conversation, right? He was completely at ease, because why wouldn't Superman be completely at ease? Nothing can hurt him, right? Except there are a couple of things, and Kryptonite even shows up in All-Star Superman, right? And so to me, like, just having that idea in the back of my mind that Superman would be so chill because nothing can really hurt him. He'd be so chill until something for the first time ever showed up that it did. And there is one scene in this episode that kind of bolsters this, I feel, where Lois is talking to Dr. Hamilton about Kryptonite, and when Superman interjects, he is all the way across the room and literally hiding behind something like a child, because he doesn't know what to do with something that can actually hurt him. And so can you imagine if this episode had actually been about Superman feeling insecure?
Interesting. Yeah, like all of a sudden his world is turned upside down. Right? He's indestructible, and all of a sudden, holy smokes, this thing could actually destroy me. What's even going on? Like, what's even happening?
What is going on? Yes. And that would, let's be honest, that would rock his world. And I just feel like 22 minutes of him having to face his fear for the first time, you know, watching the best man in the world deal with fear and insecurity would have been absolutely interesting. And of course, he would have to fight somebody who was using kryptonite against him in that story. But the real center of it is Superman and his feelings about actually being vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting route to take. And I'm just thinking about, what if you're a person who discovers you're allergic to your favorite food? Like, what do? Right? Like, it just, you know what I mean? Like, it's a game changer on how you look at things. It's going to impact you. And it's something you have to live with forever, right? Like, it doesn't just go away. It's just, you always have it. And I think having that realization that this is a permanent thing that is a weakness in your life would cause a lot of dread. So yeah, I think thematically, at the minimum, that should have been really baked into this episode.
And there are shades of it, right? There's just a couple of hints of it that made me go, why isn't there more of that?
Right. If you're gonna feature Kryptonite as the main bad guy of the episode, I think that's the way to go. Not with whatever they did here with robot dinosaurs.
So let's assume that people are intrigued by the ideas that are brought up in A Little Piece of Home, but don't love the episode. Caleb, what would you suggest they actually go watch, read, play, or otherwise?
Well, Joshua, I have a couple of different recommendations. They both are centered around meteors falling from the sky. And first and foremost, we are in the middle of I shouldn't say renaissance per se, but Stephen King has been, I would say the last 2 to 3 years, has been back in the pop culture zeitgeist. And with all the television and film adaptations that have been coming out based on his novels, he has been back in the zeitgeist in a way he hasn't been probably since like the 80s. And that had me thinking, have you seen Maximum Overdrive? I believe actually directed by Stephen King. Are you familiar with this movie, Joshua?
I have seen it, but it has been decades. I barely remember anything.
It is written, it is written, directed by Stephen King, and a meteor falls from the sky, and what happens is the vehicles, trucks, cars, get possessed and drive around and chase people around the highway, and it is fantastic. It is B-movie gold. It's got Emilio Estevez in a starring role. It's got Pat Hingle. It is a terrible movie, but it is a blast. It is fantastic. It is B-movie greatness in its truest forms. It's very pulpy. If you don't believe me, Joshua, just please go watch the trailer and then link it in the show notes. Because what it is Stephen King.
I will do it.
It's Stephen King actually appearing in the trailer trying to sell the movie, and his reaction, like the tagline, it just screams B-movie. Now, whether or not Stephen King intended it to be that way, I am not certain, but I believe this is the first time he directed a movie. And one of the trucks, most notably, on the front to showcase that it has been possessed, has a very Green Goblin-looking face. Yes,
sure,
as in
why not?
Spider-Man Green Goblin-looking face on the front. So that is, once again, Maximum Overdrive, a Stephen King written, directed film. Secondly, also bad, and I think also great, in a different way, is 1998's, I think it was 98's Armageddon, which is a Michael Bay film that I love. That's right, I do actually like some Michael Bay films for a variety of reasons, and this is, none of them are Transformers related. This one is great. It has all the Michael Bayisms. It's got, every character's really dumb. It's about oil drillers who are flying into space in order to blow up an asteroid before it hits planet Earth and wipes out the human race. Starring Bruce Willis. It's got Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler. Huge Steve Buscemi. It's a great cast. I mean, call it a guilty pleasure. It's a bad movie. It's a dumb. Well, bad's not even the right word. It's an aggressively dumb movie. But
it's true.
It is I mean, like, not even just like, oh, it's kind of dumb. As in, like, they go out of their way to simplify things as much as possible. And you know what? I find that to be completely endearing. I love the performances. I love how seriously all the actors are taking this really dumb script, which, by the way, I believe is penned by J.J. Abrams back before he was a name. And, man, it's just a good time.
Armageddon trivia. It is also the source of Aerosmith's only #1 hit, which is a crime.
Really? Because
they should have a bunch more #1 hits, first of all, and second of all, that song's not that great.
That's how it always goes, man. That soundtrack's always elevating the crappy materials. So, Joshua, now that we've gotten my recommendations for bad movies out of the way, what would you recommend people watch if they are interested in kind of following the ideas and themes we saw in A Little Piece of Home?
So I am also going back to 1998, but I am going much more thematically with the idea of something from your past coming back to haunt you.
Okay.
And I am going to suggest 1998's Les Miserables.
Oh, wow, Joshua, that is a bizarre angle. Tell Do tell. This is the one with Liam Neeson in it, right?
Yes, it is Liam Neeson in the starring role. I mean, for those of you who don't know the story of Les Miserables, there is a theft that is allowed to happen, and it completely changes a man's life for the better. And he is the thief. The thief is allowed to get away with the theft, and it completely changes his life. One act of charity, one act of mercy sets him on a different path. But there is one inspector who cannot let it go and resurfaces years later after the fact and just harries and harasses the man for what I guess we would say his previous life. Now, if you're not familiar with this very famous story that has been told and retold many times, then I want to say no more. But I loved the idea of something from your past that made your life better suddenly becoming a danger to you.
Yes.
In much the same way that Superman can't be Superman without the powers that his Kryptonian heritage gives him, but here is a small piece of his homeworld that won't just hurt him, but will kill him.
Kill him, right. Kryptonite, a chunk of kryptonite, a loaf of bread, all the same.
Absolutely true, obviously. Well, that about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk, and I'm at Joshua Unruh, and the hashtag is Animated Discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, I'm the editor-in-chief and a contributor at thecinematropolis.com, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique. We publish in-depth essays and film analysis of all types of movies and films. We also have a monthly podcast called The Cinematic Schematic, and you can find those articles and the podcast all right over at thecinematropolis.com.
Remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
And of course, the links to the Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations on the show today, and Twitter are all very easy to find in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us for this animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about the new Batman Adventures episode, Hold Comfort.
Until next time, look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's an animated discussion.